All right, let's just begin our process of slowing down, sinking into the room. If, as always, if anybody has anything in particular that they're dealing with that they'd like to, that they'd like this class to shed a perspective on, you're welcome to put it on the table, either in the chat or just unmuting yourself and talking. And until and unless you have something, just sink into your breath, but not in a sleepy way. Sink into your breath in a way that brings you deeper into this moment of wakefulness. It can sound sleepy or look sleepy to someone watching you, but the experience of it is you actually slowing down the false part of you so that you can take in more of what's actually happening right here in this moment. I think kind of the beginning phase of that feels like a simple and easy curiosity. Just, okay, what's here? What is this moment that I'm in? What's standing in between you and that moment is your past, all the things that you're hanging on to, your future, all the things you're afraid of or craving. And so to step into this moment, you have to actually just take a vacation from that whole life story and just show up here. Just patient, expanded. Let your awareness just unfold, touching every aspect of this moment, this room. Just breathe from that space for a little while. It's okay if it's a little uncomfortable, just let it be. Don't insist on comfort. Your insistence on comfort is what makes your life so uncomfortable. Be with it on its own terms this moment, exactly the way it is. and be with yourself. If you're uncomfortable, here you are in this moment, experiencing discomfort. Be with it. If you're resisting, be with that. Here you are, sitting in this moment, watching your breath and pulling against yourself at the same time. If you ask it to be something else, it'll just find ways to fake you out. If instead you accept it and bring it in full awareness on its own terms, that awareness will evolve it in a way that is natural, relatively painless, and in a way that leads you to your next step spiritually. A step which is different for all of you. A step on the path of you. That journey that you're perfectly suited to walk on this planet. But the journey of 1,000 steps doesn't begin with a petty demand. It begins with a deep breath and a sinking into what's actually present. If somebody's pulling on your attention, then here you are, sitting in a room, watching your breath while someone pulls on your attention. Let it all sit in full awareness. If you can really do that, I bet you'll find they stop pulling. For 20 years, I sat down to teach this class in a noisy library. And at the end of about an hour, everything was stone quiet. Your awareness, your attention, it doesn't just evolve you. It evolves everything connected to you. Your family and friends benefit from this. Some paths believe you can even benefit your ancestors from it. But I can only attest to the people in your life. So really sink in. This moment, here, now. Keep at it. Can you feel the waters starting to still? They'll come to a complete stillness the second you accept that there's nothing to be done about them. The second you accept that in this moment, there's just nothing for you to manipulate or conjure into existence. There's no movement for you to hold in place. There's no need for you to tell the moment what it's going to be. That's a fake spiritual life. That's a spiritual posture, a mask. It's a great way to look really spiritual, but it's not actually spiritual. Letting it all be exactly what it is without shutting your awareness down. The stillness that results from that, that's something you can count on. That's real. And it's sustainable. It doesn't take any energy. You're not holding it in place. You've just stopped covering it up with your personal story. It's quite a big difference. One way is spiritual pageantry, and the other way takes you right into the heart of what you really are. They look so similar, but they're not even comparable. That pageantry, it's a problem. It forces you to push aspects of yourself into darkness. We run into that all the time. You know, just a sense of who we should be, who we shouldn't be. Our sense of right and wrong. It creates a duality where we end up disowning part of ourselves. You know, those of you who have been hearing me talk for many years, do I seem particularly pious to you? You know, I usually am someone who's willing to say the difficult things. I'm usually very happy to expose my mistakes. I make them my main source of teaching material. I don't believe in pretense. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. The reason that I don't, sit on some big cushion and find a million different ways to try and meet your expectations of what a spiritual person should look like and be, is because to do so would be completely inauthentic. And what it would do is it would actually split reality in half. And there'd be a half of me that I can show you, and another half that I would have to completely just disown. And when you disown a part of yourself, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just a part of you you've lost control over. It's a part of you that it's just going to burst through the second you let your guard down. Surely trying to learn meditation, you've run into some of that, right? I mean, for as many times as I say that there's nothing to force, that you're just, uncovering and letting unfold, the reality is people think I need to silence my mind. Not let go into a silent mind, but silence my mind. And those of you, when you were at that phase of thinking you could do it like that, didn't you notice how as soon as you were done silencing your mind usually would spring forward as the noisiest thing in the room? I used to notice that with my teacher. We would go on these trainings, these empowerments out in the wilderness. And so, I was early in my journey and I was young and it was uncomfortable because we were camping and I absolutely abhor camping. And it would be like as soon as that trip was over, everyone just wanted to make as much noise as they could possibly make. They just wanted to get themselves to the nearest 7-Eleven and just drink the most sugary, disgusting thing they could get their hands on. Why? Because they just spent 3 days pushing that part of themselves into the shadow, just pushing that part of themselves down. It happens sometimes when you have house guests. If any of you have ever been my house guest, just assume I'm not talking about you. But it happens, whenever you have maybe some compromise that you're having to make that requires you to be just super accommodating and pleasant and sweet and to forego your own comforts and all of that stuff. All of that creates this alternate part of yourself that you stuff down. Some of us have been stuffing down parts of ourselves practically since we learned how to talk. We were taught to by our parents. And those are the parts of you that you have very little control over. When you're just talking to somebody and all of a sudden you get mad for no real reason, like they said something that just puts you in a bad mood and you can't figure out why. It's some part of yourself that you've stuffed. Some part of you that has been inauthentic in your presentation, one-sided in your presentation of life for so long that you probably even forgot that you were trying not to do it. So one of the oldest adages in the book is know thyself, right? That is the core most important lesson of any spiritual teaching, is that you have to know yourself. What that means is, we're back to the teachings, the shamanic teachings on personal responsibility. It means that when you see something that is happening outside of you that is wrong, that is upsetting to you, as difficult as it can be, you have to see what kind of ownership you can take for it. Because 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't be upsetting you if you weren't tied into it in a way that you're not seeing. Like I think, I make a point of always kind of trying to look into this myself. Like I'm always asking myself, okay, when have I done this to somebody? Why do I understand this in such a toxic way? And one of the practices is that you start by apologizing for doing it, even if you can't remember what you've done. Try it now. Put yourself on mute so that you don't embarrass yourself. But like what that looks like is, okay, let me think. So right now, hands down, the biggest thing in my life is I have a couple of physicians that are literally spreading lies about me because they want to be in charge of my guidelines. They want they want people to think they're the experts, and they don't like that someone else is the expert. And it's something that I feel victimized by. I've caught that story in me on several occasions. So first, I ask myself, okay, what is it I think they're doing? I think they are trying to manipulate other people's perception I think they're trying to manipulate other people's perception to make themselves look better by making me look worse. And then the first thing I do is I say, I'm sorry for manipulating other people's perception to try and make other people look bad and me look better. And then I sit with that and I just sit with, okay, how is that maybe true? When have I ever done that? And you just breathe with it. You say you're sorry. You can even go as far as to say you're sorry to that person who's doing it to you. I probably wouldn't do that in person to them. But to even just say their name, I'm sorry to you for having the karma that would attract this into my life. I'm sorry for my role in this. I'm sorry for any time in the past when I was willing to lie in order to make myself look better at your expense or at the expense of another person. And I'm sorry that carrying this karma has pulled that forward in you. Did you catch that? I think I finally landed on how it needed to be said. Think of something in your life, something that you feel victimized by, and let yourself see that you have done the exact same thing, that's why you're so sensitive to it. That's why you can recognize it. And instead of putting all that power and attention on the other, bring it back under your locus of control. Take responsibility for it. It's both. So I want to repeat that question just for the recording. Someone is saying, is it that you have done that to someone else, or is it that you are allowing those conditions to be present? So, for example, with these people that are doing this to me, it is an organization that has been permissive for too long of bad behavior from physicians, right? A lot of people, they see MD after someone's name and they just allow the physician to make up this story about being an expert in everything in the world. You know, not all physicians buy into that, but it is something that, at least in the United States, this seems to be an issue. So when I look at this, I am not holding it in place for the most part. I am stepping away from it, but, and in doing so, it can continue, it can stop. I don't really care at this point. But I do know that if I'm being really honest with myself, that need in me to be seen as smart is what's attracting this, right? I'm just finally at a place where I'm growing out of this. But for me, I would say one of my most recent things was this need first to just feel like I had done something with my mind, right? So I went back to school, got these ridiculous degrees, and this desire to be validated, is something that lived and breathed in me and probably still does to some extent. And rather than being too embarrassed to tell my students about that, right? Instead of insisting that you view me as perfect, I'd rather just go ahead and own it and let it be there. Because if I can own it and let it be there, I can see how smarty pants know-it-all me triggered a systems reaction from other smart-it-all know-y pantses, from other people, that it's just like, wait a minute, you can't be smarter than me. Wait a minute, you can't be the expert. I'm the expert. You're not enough like me for me to allow you to hold that space. And so on some level, even in the moment, I am responsible. I'm not more responsible than they are. Really, the system that we're trapped in is responsible. Really the system they're trapped in is the smarter I look, the more upset they get. The more upset they get, the smarter I look, because mostly, if you have to run around lying about something, it means you don't have a leg to stand on. But, the less they win, the more upset they get. And so, I don't know, I'm not going to step down from the position because of it. I might not, do it a second term. But what's important is that when I'm feeling victimized, as that's happening, that I take a breath and I own my role in it. And getting to that role, what that looks like is first kind of apologizing, all right? Looking for areas in your life where, what have I done that is just like this? And you'll always find it. But then if you sit a little longer, you'll be able to see 9 times out of 10 that, you're actively stuck in a system. If instead I had stepped into this role as, from a standpoint of just being so super grateful to be the physician's little assistant, we wouldn't be having this problem. But personally, I just don't see myself doing that. I just don't believe in that. From an integrity perspective, I believe in honesty, and I believe that people should defer to other people's judgment if they've got a different education than they do, and it's the appropriate education. So it just starts with taking ownership. It starts with this kind of flexibility in you, this idea that maybe this is all your fault too. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll change the way I talk about it, right? So when I'm talking about what's happening, rather than saying, I'm going to just make up the name, rather than saying, Jack is running around lying, I've had these really toxic meetings with Jack. What I'll say is Jack and I participate in a lot of conflict together. And something about that, just acknowledging that we're participating in a system of conflict, just wiggles everything free. But the goal is not to get rid of this other part of yourself that needs validation. The goal is to recognize it and just let it sit in the space with the part of you that doesn't have to act on it. The goal is to actually own it, recognize it as a part of yourself so that you know anytime it's functioning. And then you can just make conscious, rational choices. When you were a child, you took on a lot of different triggers. And those triggers, what they do is they literally shut off parts of your brain. So when you're a child, you'll have certain areas that maybe you're developing really great, but when you get in front of a certain kind of person, you become a child again, or you become triggered and very angry, and your ability to think rationally just disappears because you just kind of go down into your brainstem and leave your cortex behind. The idea is that there should be nothing like that. That you should be able to accept the possibility that in some ways you're a terrible person. In some ways, you're a selfish person. In some ways, you're a lustful person. In some ways, you are a non-integrous person. There's no such thing as integrity without non-integrity. One is the guardrail for the other. There are no prostitutes without prudes. There are no villains without heroes. They define each other. And you can't be one without stimulating the other. So the question becomes, are you aware of its stimulation? Or is it just lurking in the shadows, ready to kind of covertly control your behavior so that you just take it out on your spouse later? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Does it sound the opposite? Mm-hmm. Yep. The reason you can see the solution is not because there's no negativity anymore. It's because you have enough of a buffer around you that you can see that part of yourself and you can make a decision whether to engage with it or just let it be there. But what you're not doing is you're not denying its existence, right? Yes, but no, 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 no. Bob, the solution is to know your complete self. All right? So the reason that if you walk into conflict with a clear mind, just wide open, and you're just authentically being true to yourself, the reason that that works is because you have, number one, access to your, yes, that's right, Anna, respond, not react. You have access to your mental faculties so that you can respond. Do you remember a long time ago, and probably like 10 times over the course of 20 years, I've told that story about the spiritual student who his teacher ties him to a chair. And the student is so angry they can't get out of the chair, right? They're just out of control emotions. And mhm. And so the teacher basically comes back and says, well, I mean, if you had just let yourself calm down a little bit, you would have seen that these ropes aren't that tight. You can probably slip out of them. There's a knife within reach, so you could have cut the ropes. You had options, but you didn't use any of them because you were so controlled, essentially by your shadow, right? You were so controlled by the part of you that refuses to not have control. And so what we're saying here is that if you have parts of yourself that exist, but you cannot allow yourself to touch them or acknowledge them or accept them, and that's what happens when you have a bunch of tight teachings about good versus bad, and so you are spending your entire time just pushing away bad and just forcing good, forcing good, forcing good. What you do is you actually create a tremendous amount of energy on the bad, but it goes subconscious. And so in doing that, you actually will see it act out in all sorts of ways. It'll be those bouts of anger that didn't need to happen. It'll be sometimes, illnesses in your body. You can see entire religions that through forcing their image against that shadow ended up having to play its opposite. Think of the Spanish Inquisition. Think of, the witch trials. Think of all the horrible things that have happened from people trying to live half a life and deny the other half. And so what I'm saying is not that you should go and indulge in all of those things, but you can't just push them aside. They have to sit in their totality with the other side of you. You have to shine the light on all of it. So, yes, yes, you bet. I just want to be very clear. I'm not saying something different from that right now. I'm just painting the picture from a different angle. So this is the teaching of know thyself. This is also the Jungian teaching of the shadow. And it's the shamanic teaching of working with opposites. But what this is allowing yourself to ask the right questions so that you are not repressing something. If you've got something in your life that when you see it, it triggers everything in you. For me, I'm going to be honest. When I see a physician getting up and lying about me and using fake pathos to try and rally a crowd and political buzzwords, I'm always this person in an ivory tower to them, it triggers me. So doesn't mean they're not wrong to do it, but the fact that I don't just look at it and think, whatever, and just move on, right? My mentor would not have been triggered by that. My mentor would have just, not my spiritual mentor, my PhD mentor, she would have just not cared. She would have just focused on her work. For me, I care. And there's a reason I care. And the reason I care cannot just be because they're bad. That's not why I care. There are plenty of people who are bad and I don't care, right? I don't even involve myself in it. They're not part of my personal dream. If something is part of your personal dream of life and you find yourself triggered and caring, there is something there that you are not dealing with. For me, it's something around not wanting to ever be wrong. Like the idea of somebody seeing I'm wrong is one of those things that I need to be very aware of in myself. It may never go away, and it doesn't have to. It just has to sit in awareness. I need to know myself. I need to know, okay, that's a trigger for me. And so in a moment like that, you're going to respond differently. You're going to take a breath and you're going to figure out how you want to walk through this rather than just shutting down the higher levels of your brain in panic and anger and spending half your day obsessing about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's true. But you'll find, though, with the intricacies of life, we don't all feel the same about the same things. You know, I would say this is probably universal. I think most people would freak out if this were happening to them. You know, it's very public what happens to me. But, but, my point is, I gain nothing by building a case against them in my head. I can do it. I probably would win the case, but I didn't grow in any way if that happens. How do you grow? You grow by throwing yourself open and trying to figure out, what is my role in this? How have I interacted with this in the past that has me so triggered right now? And can I own that? Can I give that as much attention as I'm giving the other person? And in doing so, can I come to see that we're both just participating in a system? We're both just participating in a reactionary system of emotion, and then find a way to step out of it so that you can be free, even while it's happening. Can you guys see that distinction? Am I blabbering? So Anna has said here, respond, not react, which is exactly, I would say if I were going to create a bumper sticker for this teaching, that's what that would be. And she's saying that's an unhealed part of us speaking. Yep, I agree. The funny thing about the emotional body is it really is its nature to be unhealed. I doubt there is ever going to be a moment where we completely heal the energy body. You can transcend, I'm sorry, the emotional body. You can transcend the emotional body. You can rise above it. I think better than that is to learn how to be in it, but to just know it intimately so that you can see when a trigger is coming, you're prepared for it and you know it and you can make some decisions. And then, you almost, when you get really good at that, you'll find that some of those old triggers, you see them and they look funny to you because, it's just an invitation to spend your day just spilling your energy out like wasted gasoline. If instead you can just own whatever you can possibly own, losing the battle in that way is actually winning the battle, because try it. You'll see what it does is all your energy comes rushing back to you. It's a new level of adult maturity. And it's something that even a lot of my spiritual teachers, I don't think they ever fully pulled it off. Once you become a teacher, if you allow yourself to see yourself as beyond reproach, that's the beginning of no more growth for you. And that is what happens to a lot of people. It's one of the reasons that I lead with my mistakes, because I have no interest in being your perfect little Buddha. I don't see the value in, one, presenting something that no one else is actually going to be experiencing in their life, right? You need to see people living their life. And two, it's never true. You know, it's never the whole truth. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people. I get very close. And what you always end up seeing is, no, they're dealing with the same things we all are. You know, it's just they've gotten to a position where people are doing their work for them, and nobody's calling them out on their stuff. You know, I would rather spend my life letting life call me out, because that's where the growth is. You know, for the rest of your life, you need to be just fluffing out that system, rooting out more and more, not to get rid of it, but to let it find its balance within you, to actually let it step into the light of your awareness. And what you'll find is that it actually has a place. You know, every feeling that you have is good. It's just that sometimes it's misplaced. There are places where anger is very useful. There are places where love facilitates some of the worst things I've ever seen. You know, that idea of knowing yourself and knowing your reactionary system very well and knowing all the different parts of you and having access to those, if you can bring that into a place where you're not shutting down your higher mind, then you can start functioning with those missing parts in useful ways in your life. There's a time and a place for everything. Okay, I think, are there any questions about that before we go back into meditation? I know I talked a lot tonight. Okay, so let's just go back into meditation and just open the space up so that everything can just kind of percolate inside of you. Okay, just give it a chance to land. It's okay if you forget some of it. It's in there, and it'll come out when you need it. So you don't have to cling to it. Don't ever cling to a spiritual teaching. Just let it move through you. If you've seen it once, it's in there, and it'll continue to grow. And this will be posted for a week on the website if you want to go see it again. Take something that's triggering you and start questioning it. What is my role? in keeping this alive? How did I bring this into the space? When have I done this to someone? What is the part of me that let that happen? I invite that part of me forward. To return back to the whole in understanding and acceptance. I seek to understand you. And I apologize for the part of me that pulled this forward in someone else. It's the hardest one to say, but it's the one that's the most healing. I'm sorry something in me took you there. I'm sorry we're participating in this system of conflict. If you really do this, you'll see how freeing it is. It doesn't free you from the repressed part of yourself. It just changes your relationship to it. It takes the part of you that you couldn't control and brings it right back into your volitional feeling body. The part of you that has a choice. If you shun it and shame it out of existence again, because you're better than that, it's just going to continue to control you because you're not better than that. You are what you are. Own that and learn how to operate it properly. Okay, everybody. Happy to answer any more questions. If there aren't more questions, I think I'm going to let you get back to your night. What was that? You bet, guys. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. I'll see you next week.